Hey friend, I'm Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're listening to the Created Worthy podcast. This show is all about honoring the life stories of women from different ages, beliefs, backgrounds, and experiences. Everyone's got a story, and instead of getting stuck in the trap of unworthiness, this is a safe place for stories to be shared. On this show, we chat about the transformative power of creative processing too, and how we can utilize our God-given creativity with intention to heal, grow, find joy, create simplicity in the midst of our chaotic lives. So pull up a seat at our table because we are all created worthy. Hello, welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. Today, I am joined by another worthy warrior, Jen Weaver. Jen is a Bible teacher, author, and the host of Good God Talks, a podcast helping you connect with God through uncommon conversations in everyday moments. She's passionate about empowering believers to engage in every aspect of life with God. When Jen discovered the practice of writing poetry, her intimate awareness of God and her appreciation of Scripture exploded. Her latest book, A Beckoning to Wonder, is an illustrated poetry collection helping every reader rest in God's goodness as you re-energize your connection and experience the life-changing ease of wonder. Married to her best friend Jared, she's a happy boy mom of two, growing sons, and is most likely to be found with her hair full of dry shampoo, ditto, and a mug of coffee in hand. Cheers, my friend. I've got one right now. Jen, thank you so much for joining me on the Created Worthy podcast. I can't wait for my listeners to hear even more about your real life story.
Oh my goodness, Danielle, thank you so much for having me. I know we're going to have such a great visit and hopefully share some things that encourage your listeners with everything they're going on with in their own daily lives.
Oh, yes. And we're going to start by you sharing your story. So, could you talk to me about your life? Like, where did you start off at? Where are you from? And maybe tell us a little bit about what life was like for you growing up.
This is fun. I love going back down memory lane in that way.
Yeah.
So, I grew up the oldest daughter and the oldest child of four children in a Christian home. So I grew up with an awareness of God. I grew up in the church. I also grew up not really understanding who he was or what life with God could look like. And so a lot of my early years were really driven in a lot of different ways and included my faith. Like I'm driven to show God that I can do good things for him. That's what he really wants from me. Has to be. And I've always been entrepreneurial. So I've always been driven in that way too. We did not have a lot of money growing up. And so if I wanted to try and do things or I wanted little pets, my parents were like, hey, you got to figure out how you're going to have money for those animals. And so I would start little side businesses selling crafts door to door. And I would do like holiday, small stints, small seasons of entrepreneurship and always loved reading and writing. And so it's really fun to look back on some of these things and see one, how many things were really great foundations for me, and two, how many things changed. Like my approach to God was, I so misunderstood him. I so misunderstood who God is, and I misunderstood myself because of that. And also to see the things that have carried through in different expressions. And so now, as a Bible teacher, I have my own ministry and I am still an entrepreneur and I
Yeah.
love creative ideas and I love books and I love writing and reading. And so I'm an author. And so just getting to see those themes carry through, like childhood Jennifer would be so excited that grown up adult Jen is an author. Oh my gosh, we did it. What? And so
Wow.
that's also fun to reflect back on.
Yes, I love that. And I can totally see that. I can picture you as little Jen knocking door to door, like, hi, do you want to buy my bracelet?
Oh, 100%. And I was a unique kid. We had a bunch of rules. I grew up in a really conservative, very strict household, and we had a lot of different rules that had different purposes to them, and some were really practical. Anyway, one of our rules was even for the daughters, we couldn't grow our hair out until 6th grade because my mom didn't wanna have to mess with hair, like being unruly and wild and things. And so I had this little, like, bowl haircut. So if you picture me, like, five-year-old Jen, little brown-haired bowl haircut, my absolute favorite outfit was this pink Minnie Mouse polka dot double-breasted skirt suit. And I'm, like, going door to door, like, with my little crafts, like, selling and a little businesswoman and also climbing trees in my spare time because I was very much a tomboy. And so I was just this juxtaposition of all sorts of random things and would escape into Nancy Drew books whenever I could,
I love that. That's like such a beautiful full picture of little Jen. And
right?
so I want to hear as you got older and into your teenage years and out of high school, what was that Jen? Was she still
Mm.
into Nancy Drew books? Did you carry that throughout the course of your life? Just the being really accomplishment driven and performance driven, but also entrepreneurial and tomboy. Yeah, paint us a little bit of a picture for as you got older.
So, as I got older, I definitely carried that tenacity to get stuff done. I had always wanted to write, and that pivoted a little bit in, especially in those high school years, more to journalism. So, I wrote for the school news magazine. And in 6th grade, our school had a page in the city. I lived in a small city, and we had a page in the city newspaper. And so I got to be a contributing author. And so that felt really cool. Oh, I'm actually contributing stuff that like grown-ups read in like the real newspaper. So I had those pivotal things where I really just enjoyed writing. I liked crafting stories. I've always been really justice oriented. And so that that's one of those beautiful things. I think sometimes the things that are innate and are good and beautiful in us can get twisted around and misapplied or are lessened in different degrees. So the work that I put on myself as a believer to I got to make sure God's proud of me. I got to make sure I'm doing the good things. Like I was really critical of myself and judged myself really hard. Where in the opposite way, in health, in things that are true of who I am and of who God is, that's a lot of justice. It's not, oh, I have to earn, but it's I can advocate for other people, not working for identity, but working from identity. So I started to see those justice themes really play out. And I had this pivotal season happen in my early teens where I started realizing that people had this relationship with God that I didn't have. And so I was a believer. I had responded to the gift of salvation, but it was still very works-based. It was still very heavy. And so when other people would talk about hearing God speak to them or the way that they loved their Bibles, I just didn't understand that. And I started realizing that there was this whole aspect to life with God that I didn't have and that I desperately wanted. And for me, it was I'm already working so hard. Like I can work hard at stuff. I'll just change what I'm working hard toward. And a lot of what God was showing me was a simpler road, an easier road, a way of resting in his care instead of trying to earn it because I he already offered it and I was trying to earn something he'd already given me. And so a lot of that was starting to bear fruit in my life in those high school years.
Yeah. So you alluded to it already, but it sounds like you really came to a point in your relationship with God where you realized it wasn't maybe a relationship,
Oh,
but
yeah.
rather, yeah. So
Mhm.
tell us about like how that unfolded and what did you do at that point? Because I think that I would assume that kind of took some transforming of your own thought patterns and your heart position towards him. So take us through that journey and when that happened.
Yeah, it definitely is a journey, and it's still a journey that I'm on because we all get to continue knowing God more and knowing ourselves more. A lot of the approach that I had to God was really based on my own efforts and based on ways I had misunderstood him. And so I thought, okay, I need to show God that I'm worth saving. Like he did all this for me. I'm worth it. I'm going to work really hard for you. I'm going to try and do things that you would want me to do. Like you want me to perform well. And I wouldn't have had all of the vocabulary for it at the time. I still would have called it relationship, but what I had called relationship was really more like he was my boss or he was Almighty God that I hoped was happy enough with me that someday I would actually make it into heaven. Like it was very job performance y. And starting to change that really was peeling away these misunderstandings that I had about his care for me. Because at the core of it, because I grew up in the church, I'd always been part of, like, outreach. I'd always been part of, "Let's invite our friends who don't know God." And so I had picked up these, I call them lesser stories. I picked up these broken perspectives about God and these broken perspectives about me, these lesser stories along the way. And one of those big lesser stories that I had picked up was that God loved me less than he loved you. That I was already in and I could be okay. Like I could suck it up. I could overcome my shortcomings. I could repent of my sin and I could try really hard. And I thought of myself almost um as lumped in because God so loved the whole world that he wasn't just going to reject me, but it was like, "Oh, Jen, I guess she's included." But that I was lumped in because he wanted to get to you. And so my role was to be a good
Mm.
worker bee. My role was to help him reach the ones he truly loved. And it's taken years, even within the past couple years, that I've actually been able to be like, oh, that was one of those core lies I believed, that
Mm.
actually we're all the ones that he so dearly loves. And we get to partner with him, and that's beautiful, but that's not performance. That's part of the outflow of the relationship. And that's not the reason why. He didn't love me so he could get to you. He loves me for me, and he loves
Mhm.
you for you. And because of that, we get to be part of how he's showing love to all of the world.
Yeah, and we get to be part of that community that we're created for, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's, like, a core belief of mine is that we are created for community and family, and
Yeah.
being able to be a part of a family, the family of God is just such a huge revelation that I think as kids and even as young people, we're like, "Eh." It's just like one of those things that you hear and you don't really understand the gravity of it. But as you get older and as you grow your own family, you're like, "Oh, he loves me like I love my kids? What?"
Mhm.
Like, you can't I only have 1, but you have 2, and I'm sure that you could not look at either one of your kids and be like, "Yeah, I love that one more."
Never.
No. No.
Mm-mm.
That's not how it works. It's like your love duplicates, I've heard, with every kid that you have, and the love that you have for your husband is different, and I just think that that's the family unit is just such a beautiful example of the capacity of God, right? Like, he's the ultimate father.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he loves us personally in that way.
Mhm.
And going back to the relationship side of stuff, I used the vocabulary that related to relationship. We're walking with God, we're doing life with God, we're doing life with church family. It's not religion, it's relationship. But when I really thought about it, I didn't feel known by God. I
Mm.
didn't feel like he truly knew me on purpose. I didn't feel like he was interacting with me in ways that I could notice in my day to day life. And so part of that really began with, oh, God wants relationship with me. Like I don't know why it just didn't click that he actually would invite each and every person into relationship like he does.
Yeah.
And then it was learning how to recognize his voice when he speaks and how to notice when he's at work. And sometimes that's easier than others, especially when we go through really hard stuff. It's okay, God, where are you working in this? How are you involved in this mess that I find myself in? Why am I even in this mess? And so it's also those wrestling things, which my previous approach to God was like, "Oh, I better clean up my act before I go to him." I don't know if anyone
Yeah.
else listening to this grew up in the church and in this way, like I'm outing my family a little bit here. Sorry guys. But like you
It's
roll
in love.
into the it is. It's totally in love. We can all
Yeah.
laugh about this. But you
Yes.
roll into the church parking lot and we're like screaming at each other in the van and you park and the van door slides open and then we're all like smiling and walking in and it's we're happy to be here today. And then you get back in the car and you're like, "Oh my gosh, stop touching me." Like it's all of the
Yep.
and so I had this perspective of God of I better clean myself up a little bit. I
Mhm.
better clean up my attitude before I bring it to him. And he is holy. There's an awe and a reverence that he is worthy of. He is all powerful and almighty and entirely different from us, like holy. Also, he is totally able to meet us in our messes, and he delights to do he longs to show us that he is here with the brokenhearted and to bind up our wounds.
Mhm.
And so he was teaching me that I could come to him honest and I didn't have to clean myself up because in a lot of ways I couldn't. Like the pain I was going through or the wounds that I was carrying, I couldn't actually make any better on my own. I needed to bring them to him. And so all of my masking was just making it more painful. And he's no, actually come. Let me know you. Let me know the deep desires of your heart. Let me know the places where you're hurt and let yourself know me even in these hard places. And those are some of the places where I've gotten to know him in the most tender ways.
Oh my gosh, I love that, and I just keep hearing, like, "Pull up a seat at my table," you know?
Yeah.
No, you're not getting up until you finish your vegetables, but it's, "No, you're not getting up until you give me your heart. I'm really here looking at you." And yeah, and for you. I just love that. The way that your words just paint these beautiful scenes of who God is just in this loving and real and honest way is just I could listen to you talk all day, Jen. I think I've told you that before.
He has had to make it so clear to me because it was so hard for me to recognize. So that encourages me because I love encouraging other people in this way. Even with my podcast, Good God Talks, he's available. He is our good God who talks with
Mhm.
us. And part of it is just building that habit of engaging. And he's like, notice me, see me here,
Yeah,
see how I'm here for you, see how I'm on display in the Bible, see how I'm on display in your life. Like I am God and I am here for you.
so good. Oh my gosh, so good. So, going back to your story a little bit, talk to me about meeting your husband and starting your career and becoming a mom. I know that season of your life, it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies like people may think, or I think a lot of times when people are looking at our lives or hearing the revelations that we've had about our past and about our childhoods and like what we've learned now as the present person that we are, still healing, always a journey, like you were saying. But it's easy to forget that everyone has walked through valleys.
Mhm.
And so yeah, just take us back to that season of your life where you met your husband and were starting your career.
Yeah. So Jared and I met at the same church and we had some interactions. Actually, our first real interaction, he asked me to borrow money, which is a hilarious story.
What? Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Red flag.
Normally, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll try and share a short version of it here. So between me and the Lord, I was going through a season of learning to be generous without expecting to get anything back in return. And because of limited funds and things I had grown up with, I really had a poverty mindset. Like I anticipated lack instead of anticipating God's care. And so he was teaching me generosity. And apparently, word got out and the way I learned that was the church that we were at had this ministry program in it. It was a 3-year unaccredited program. And I was already a student in it. And Jared was newer to the church and wanted to attend. And he didn't realize that it was like $35 application fee or something. So it was the last day that you could apply. It happened to be a Sunday and he goes to turn in his application and he didn't have cash on him. He didn't have his checkbook. He didn't have whatever. And so his friend says, I'll introduce you to this girl, Jen. She'll give you the money. And so I'm like, how do people know that I'm like growing in this generosity thing? What is happening here? So anyway, Jared comes up to me and he's, hey, I'll pay you back. I'm not expecting you to just give it to me. Could I have $35 for the application? I was like, sure. And ripped out my checkbook. And so he did. He paid me back the next week. But it was so funny because he felt so awkward about it, and we laugh about it, but I got to invest in his spiritual development
Yeah.
before we were even together, which is really fun.
I
Like,
love that. That's the cutest story ever of yeah, I just love that. You're
I'm
right.
like
That's not a red flag. Okay, he gets a pass.
I know, a pass. It would have been a problem if, like, things had played out differently. Here we go.
Yeah.
But it was so fun to look back on that and be like, "Oh god, like, you were teaching me this thing, and because I was responding to you, I got to see how you used that in these ways in my life and
Yeah.
in my husband's life." So we knew of each other, we're going through this program, and then we really got to know each other. I was serving in our high school ministry and wanted to move up to serving in young adults, so I had leadership experience, but was changing ministries, and we had small groups. And he was an apprentice leader in young adults with a group that was so large they needed to multiply out and didn't have leadership experience yet.
Mm.
And so our young adults pastor asked if we would co lead a young adults group together. And we were both like, sure, but this isn't going to be anything. And then we fell in love and got married.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so how long between meeting and getting married? I know it's, like, such a specific question, but for my
Um,
husband and I, it was very short, so I just love to hear.
So for us, it was long. So we were really serious about each other, but we didn't want to rush into marriage. So we actually dated for 4 years.
Wow.
And so we had met probably a year-ish before then, but I had already started planning our wedding because we went ring shopping a year before he proposed. So by the time he proposed, I was like, I have spreadsheets, I have colors. Like our engagement was only 4 months because I'd already started planning.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
And then
And
how
then
lo Oh, go ahead.
you had asked a little bit about kids and stuff. So we
Yeah.
intentionally had wanted to wait a few years before starting our family. And then I had unexplained fertility problems. And so we ended up having a longer time period than we had anticipated before we had children. Our sons are both rainbow babies. So we had a
Mm.
miscarriage before each one of them. And that was a tough season to navigate because even in the season, like I was not one of those people that immediately started telling people like we're trying to start a family. So most of my friends didn't know about our struggles for months and months. And so I was hosting baby showers and I'm celebrating the birth
Jen.
of friends' kiddos while I'm like, okay, I'm still not getting pregnant. I'm still not getting pregnant. I had a loss now. And so we're like navigating all of this. And so there's a lot of heartache in that
Mhm.
season, a lot of the waiting that was just really heavy and trying to navigate that, trying to be open-handed before God of,
Mhm.
okay, God, what do you have for me? And then
Yeah.
also grieving, like our grief was both for the babies that we lost and then also the grief of the dream deferred. It was, oh, we still don't for our first loss, it was we still don't have a child and then I had really rough pregnancies, and so even that just the toll it took on my body and figuring out what's going on and all sorts of things. So that was a season, and I am so grateful that we have our 2 sons that we get to raise.
Yeah. So, when you were walking through that season of infertility and loss, how were you able to continue moving forward and r relying on God, even in the midst of, I assume, such deep grief with I relate that we've been going through infertility issues for many years now, but I can't even imagine hosting a baby shower for somebody. Like, even when and this is just a glimpse into, like, how I feel at this point in my infertility journey, how I, like, protect myself from getting angry and getting stuck in that comparison trap, but when somebody I know, even if I know and love them, gets pregnant and they share on social media, like, I have to mute their posts for their pregnancy just so that I'm not, like, building resentment or getting angry even at God every time I see them. So, what was your experience going through that season, and how did you navigate it?
So I think it's unique for everybody, and it was different for me in different parts of the journey. So I think one thing that helped me was actually doing something really similar. I didn't force myself, or at least I didn't continue forcing myself. I could
Mm.
start from that place. Anyone who's hearing me talk so far just on this podcast episode, you're like, "You are a try hard person." I am. I was like, "I will figure this out. It's not going to bother me
Yeah,
anymore."
I was
Like,
like that for a while too.
yeah. And I had to learn to give myself space that if I needed to not go to a baby shower, if I needed to not host that one, if I needed to not see those social media posts, to let myself be where I was at and not judge myself for it, not come down on myself for it, but to care for my own heart as I was navigating this hard season and to find ways that I could still show love for the people that I love, that I am happy for, but that didn't feel like I had to dishonor myself to honor them, that didn't feel disingenuous, that could still feel true. And because some of those times I'm like, I'm writing this card right now and this feels like I'm lying through my teeth because I'm so sad that I don't have a baby right now that and so it's making space to be where you're at and to know that God holds us in those seasons too. Part of it too was really asking God to help me learn to celebrate with those who celebrate and to mourn with those who mourn. And part of that was even finding safe people that I could bring into parts of my own grief and mourning that would mourn with me. I tend, in part because of some other stuff I've gone through in life, I tend to close in on myself when I'm going through hard things. Like I cocoon in my own self protection. And I'm used to having to go through hard things solo, like from childhood stuff and things. And I needed to make space for Jared to be in some of that grief with me, make space for the Lord to be in some of that grief with me. It was also finding ways to celebrate in ways that I could and were still honoring to my heart. So sometimes it was like I'm hosting the shower and I'm caring for my heart afterward. And there are some memories I have. I'm like, I had a good cry the day before. We had a great party. Everyone went home. I had a good cry afterward. And it's just, it's both. There's space for both grief and celebrating in the same human heart in the same season.
Mm, that is
So that
so,
was
so good. There is, say that again. That is like a mic drop moment.
there's space for both celebrating and grieving in the same human heart in the same season.
Oh my gosh, so good. I got the Holy Spirit bumps again. Yes, that's so true. And it actually reminds me of this podcast episode with my sweet friend Leah. She came on and told her story, and she talked about that too. She said that there are seasons where we can experience joy and sorrow at the same time. And like we have to just be willing to hold them both with open hands. And I was like, oh, yes, that's just such a huge lesson that I think we have to learn over. And whether you're walking through infertility or you're walking through the loss of a family member or you're walking through a season of uncertainty, like there are just over the course of our human lives, there are so many valleys, as I referred to earlier, that we walk through. And I think what ends up being really dangerous for us in our growth and our healing and our ability to experience the fruits of the spirit is when we resist experiencing those human emotions. There's actually so much goodness that comes from feeling your grief
Mhm.
and from allowing God like to really be there with you in it. And there's so much joy that comes from experiencing your joy, but that in itself is not just something that naturally happens sometimes, especially when you're walking through a hard season. Like you have to choose to experience joy and you have
Yeah.
to choose to find those moments. Like for you, celebrating a friend, like that was a choice of yours. And I'm sure you guys did have an incredible party and it was probably the best baby shower ever. And I love that you did that because you knew that would bring her joy and that would it probably brought you a an abundant amount of joy, right? And then
Yeah,
you
it
were
did.
still able to have those moments of sorrow and grief, and neither one of the it's not like they, are counterproductive, right? They actually are the opposite, like, they're more productive together. I love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you for
we're
that.
yeah, and even to what you were sharing earlier, we're made for community, we're made for family. And so sometimes it is, okay, I have this tension in myself because I would love what you have, but I can also celebrate that you have it because I love that you have it. Like it's even the visual of us all being brought to the table in the author space and the communicator space. It can sometimes feel like there's this competition. There's only so many spaces for books on a bookshelf. And so if another author gets it, will there be space for mine? God is not limited like that. It's not, "Oh, no, he
No.
used up all of his miracles to help this friend have a baby. Now I'm not gonna have mine." "I can give immeasurably abundantly more than anyone can ask or imagine. You don't have to vie for your own or feel like you're missing it because someone else got it. You can trust me with all of it."
Mm,
And yeah, like, I'm so grateful looking back on it that I didn't miss those times. Like, I didn't miss those opportunities to celebrate, and that I was starting to learn that I can care for my own heart. It wasn't just like stuff down your emotions and pretend it doesn't bother you. It was, okay, how can I make space and how can I invite the Lord into this space with me? Because He is always ready to do that. And that was also something I learned so much more in those hard seasons
mhm.
of how much God meets us in the difficulties.
Yeah. And he did give you your miracles, and you have 2 adorable boys that
Yeah.
are how old now?
They're 6 and 9.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah, and even that, I am so grateful for them. It is miraculous that they are here. One of our losses, I call her our warrior baby, was a little bit more involved. She had a chromosome abnormality, and so she
Oh.
wasn't developing on pace, and because we were going to a fertility doctor, that's how I got pregnant with Dylan. When we got pregnant with her, we were having all these extra appointments. And so we knew, oh, she should have a heartbeat, and she didn't. So they actually had thought we had lost the baby. And then we went back because I hadn't miscarried. And they're like, oh, there is a heartbeat. So we went from grief to praying and, God, if this is your will, let this baby survive. And we went back a following week and we found out she no longer had a heartbeat. And so, because of that, and because it was our second loss, they did testing to find out why, and so we found out it was a girl and she had a chromosome abnormality, and so there was a lot in the midst of that. One of the gifts that was there in the hardship of that season was that it didn't take away from my worship. And there's
Mm,
things that in your head that you hope make to your heart. And that was one of those things. Like, even in the hardship, God, I don't want to take my heart away from you. I don't want to turn my heart away. I want to still be able to worship you. And so you hope, like, when I go or if I go through a really hard season, I hope that's still there. And it was. And so that was a beautiful gift. And also, I still would love to have a daughter, and we don't have plans. We don't have plans for another
yeah.
child. So it's also that tension of, I'll have daughter-in-laws one day, but I would love this thing that's probably not what my life will include, and bringing that to the Lord in a different way, but in the same posture. God, I invite you into this hard thing. I'd love to have a little girl. Maybe I'll have granddaughters one day. Maybe I'll have daughters-in-law that let me take them shopping. Like, whatever that's, but also bringing those areas of grief or loss. Like, I've had to grieve that in it itself of, I might not ever have a daughter. I'm probably not ever going to give birth to a daughter. And also taking that tenderly to the Lord and asking for his truth and asking for his healing and for his compassion and for his care in those areas. And I like to share that story. Actually, I don't even know how often I've shared that publicly. This might be my first time I've mentioned it
Oh,
on a podcast. But part of why I wanted to share that is I think it can feel, oh, you got what you wanted. Sometimes if you're hearing testimonies, you've wanted the same thing, but you got it. It's easy to say that after the
yeah.
fact. And I do. I wouldn't change my voice for anything. I love being a boy mom. There's also this part of the dream that I'd always wanted to have a daughter that
Yeah.
I don't have. And even in that, there's God's grace and his presence and his comfort and his loving care. And so, for anyone who's navigating these hard things, no matter what it looks like in your life season, know that God meets you in all of it.
I'm so glad that you shared that, and thank you for sharing that because, yeah, I think that is so important to not just jump to, "And now it was hard, but now it's good." No, there's still pain there, and there's still longing there, and there's
Yeah.
still hope there, and there's still grief there, right? Like, it's all of those things, and that is, I think, part of this human experience that God has created us to all have. But when we get stuck in things like the comparison trap, which happens all the time, whether it's on social media or through podcast or If you look at a billboard, it's all around us. And so
Yeah.
that's why Created Worthy exists is as a reminder that we all have stories and all of our stories genuinely matter. And when we share them, we are reminded of the truth that your life is not better or worse than my life, and my life is not better or worse than your life. The storms that we're navigating are different, but we're all in them in different
Mhm.
ways. And the waves hit at different times. There are riptides at different times. And so yeah, I just want to thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about creative processing because
Yes.
I love creating and I know you love creating. And when I asked you about your creative processing methods, you told me writing and designated sense. I really need to know what designated sense, like how you engage in creative processing through designated sense. Tell me about that.
Yes. I was attending a writers conference many years ago, and one of the questions came up along the lines of how do you get into your creative zone faster? What do you do to help you get into that space? And the answer was a panel. And one of the panelists said that the way they did it was they use a sensory glimmer, like a positive trigger, to jump them into that space. And so it could be like a certain seat in your home. I have a friend who has the certain flavored Jolly Rancher that she only eats when she's creating, or it could be a candle. And so I started with a candle and then I moved to an essential oil. And so Raven, this is not a plug. I am not a Young Living distributor, but Raven from Young Living is a scent that I only diffuse when I'm writing. And it serves as the sensory glimmer to jumpstart me. It feels like that. It feels, and I'm jumping into this creative space by using something sensory.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna start doing that. Also, I think I have Raven as well, but I'm like now I'm thinking like, "Oh my gosh, I could use peppermint when I'm writing. I could use eucalyptus when I'm
Yeah. So the hard
painting."
part is don't pick one that you'll want to use for other things.
That's true.
So,
It has
like
to
you,
be like a unique scent.
yes,
Yeah,
because you
I
what
love
you
that.
don't want is that you have a headache or something and you put on peppermint and then all of a sudden your brain is trying to start with writing projects.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true. Okay, I can't use peppermint or eucalyptus. Oh, good thing I have a stockpile of essential oils to look through.
There you go. There you go.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. So, just to wrap a bow on creative processing, just in case this is the first episode that somebody has heard of the Created Worthy podcast, creative processing is a tool that helps you to activate your creative mind by setting a certain intention. So it's simply pairing creativity, which I believe is a God given gift that every single person has. It just looks different within everyone with intention, and when you pair those things you are able to tap into the fruits of the spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, selflessness, and self-control. Is that what it is? I feel like I'm gentleness and self-control. There we go. But all of that to say you can actually experience, not just know about peace or know about joy, but you can experience those things when you activate your creativity, which is an innate healing modality. How I recommend doing that is if this is new to you, which likely it isn't, most everyone is already doing this subconsciously. I just am one of those people that's like, when you know better, you do better. When you feel overwhelmed and you know you have a tool for it, you can tap into the tool and not feel overwhelmed anymore. Let's do that. So I recommend using the prompt. The purpose of enter your creative method is to process, enter your certain intentions. So for you, Jen, if we were to do it for writing, you could say the purpose of writing is to process your gratitude for your husband or the success of your new book, which is actually what we're going to talk about next.
So fun. I love the intentionality you take to this. And writing for sure helps me process. I do train of consciousness writing in my journal. I have another book that I write things down in that I want to remember, ideas, to-do lists, all of the things. And those intentional prompts can be super helpful. I find that even in my own learning, if I start writing based on what I'm learning, it helps me learn it better and process it
Mhm.
more more thoroughly, like different things will spark for me that I didn't even notice sometimes just when I was reading. Writing helps me.
Oh, yes, and one thing that I've noticed for me, it's been present forever, but now I'm, like, navigating year 7 in entrepreneurship, and there are partnerships that have to dissolve or clients that aren't a good fit, and you have to write those harder emails. I'm like, "Oh my gosh," the second I sit down and write an email and I'm able to timeline something out or just put together my thoughts, it really does bring you that clarity that you're seeking, and I've heard it said that writing is the gateway to the subconscious, and I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense," because it just
Mhm.
helps for me, it helps to just get that wavy, all tangled up, jumbled up mess in your brain into something that makes sense. Even if it only makes sense to you, at least it makes sense to you and it's not jumbled up and spinning around in your brain.
Yeah,
I love writing. But
same.
also there are so many other ways to create. So for those of you who are like, "I am not creative," first of all, tell me your life story and I promise you I can show you the threads of creativity all throughout it. And second, like creating spreadsheets is creative, cleaning is creative. Putting on a certain scent, even the process of identifying scents that you like, that is creative. So there are endless and numerous ways to be creative. All right, soapbox done.
Love it.
So tell me about what is going on in your life and business. And I want you to tell us specifically about A Beckoning to Wonder.
So, A Beckoning to Wonder is the latest book, and it is so fun. It was this massively stretching project. So, I am a writer. My first book was A Wife's Secret to Happiness. And it's really the core message is if you're a Christian and a wife, then your marriage gets to be an expression of your faith. And so, how to partner with God in your marriage and life with God is my theme. It's my core message is going to come through in everything. We can experience God in the Bible and in the world. And so A Beckoning to Wonder initially didn't even start as a poetry collection. I was just writing about it, about the wonder that we have in God, about how we can enter into this ease of experiencing him through noticing and wonder and seeing more of his goodness in the Bible and in our daily lives. And I realized it just wasn't evoking wonder, which was the whole point. I've said for years that if you can only say something one way, then you don't know it very well. And I felt like God offered that back to me in a very kind, direct way. And he was like, "So how well do you know this?" And I was like, "Okay, I can try writing it another way." And so even for months of working on the project, I couldn't even call it poetry myself. I called it sentences broken over lines. I think that might even be how I described it to you the first time we talked.
That's so funny. Yes, I remember that.
So it has been such a fun project to work on with God. And then I have an artist friend who made illustrations for it. So it is fully illustrated and the poems are broken out. Each poem is broken out over multiple pages. But it really is exploring God's grand story on display in the Bible and on display in our lives. And there's a little intro at the very beginning that says every page in the Bible and every moment of life invites us to experience God,
Hmm.
beckoning us to wonder who is God really and what is God up to, and to marvel at what we find. And that's what the collection explores how we can find Him in the Bible and in life.
Wow. Even that is a poem. I remember when you first were telling me about it, I was like, are there even rules to poetry? Like, I thought poetry
Technically,
was like,
no.
okay. I was like, I thought like you could just put words on a paper and that's poetry, random words. It's not poetry. You were like, technically, no. That's exactly what you said, I think.
Yeah, I'm like, for somebody else, for me, I'm like, I don't have a degree in this. I don't have a certificate in this. I was like, I don't even know, but
Yeah.
it's been really fun to share it. It's been really fun. It was a stretching and really fun project to work on with God and really just exploring because he is so much closer than we can think of him. And so getting to explore how to communicate that in different words and in my own words.
Yes, I love that. Could you read us one more poem from the book?
Yes, I'd love to.
I just want my listeners to experience the way that you continue to experience, but in poetry form specifically, the way that you just can draw people in and through your words to God. It's just such a gift. So,
Thank you, friend. I enjoyed doing it. Okay, so this is a poem from A Beckoning to Wonder, and it's called Space. And actually, I was going to describe more of it. I'm just going to go into it.
perfect.
Explore this space for a minute. Space for all our stories within God's, whether we live in hostility or humility before Him. For all our gladness and groanings, tangled messes and tender moments, not empty, chaos ruled darkness requiring you fight for your own, but space with form and function, order and identity by divine design, God given human agency, free will over your own story. He made sure of it. Your story exists, but not in the way most have known it. God's kingdom surpasses any earthbound one. Greatest success, not in what you create, not in what you can earn, not in what fame you gain for your name. Your story doesn't require that you become the main character or fade into the background. Squeeze into the margin or add your own pages. You've always been significant. God never left or left you out. You've never had to earn his attention or strive to survive without it. There's been space this whole time, space for you this whole time, space for heart longings and learnings deeper than words, nightmares you hope never come true, pain you peel off layer after healing layer like a rose in bloom. Dreams deferred for days you pray aren't too far away, grief with swells that overtake you, mistakes you can't stop repeating yet, victories that trained you for coming battles, giftings not given to you by mistake, identity from God you've hardly begun to realize. Space for it all, space to be you. Space to come alive in God's grand reality. Space to choose.
Oh my goodness. That was so beautiful, Jen. I want to cry. But just, yeah, you just took me on a whole journey and I am just so grateful. So, to everyone listening, make sure that you go get her book. It's so beautifully illustrated. The illustrations in themselves have an amazing story behind them. And Jen, can you tell my listeners where they can find and connect with you?
Yes, I would love to connect. I'm on Instagram most commonly as my social media, and my handle, all the places, is the Jen Weaver. And that's not because I'm a big deal. I just have a real common name. And then my website is thejenweaver.com. And my podcast is Good God Talks, which is on all podcast platforms, including YouTube.
Yes, yes. So definitely make sure to go follow, connect with her, and follow along with her journey. She is just so amazing and has been putting out so much good content. I know that she just recently put out some resources for parents. So there are just some really amazing ways to engage with your kids and to grow in your rhythms with God in your family. So definitely make sure to go follow her. And Jen, I just want to tell you that I am so grateful and honored to have heard your story here today. You are truly a gift, and your friendship and encouragement over the last several months has been such a blessing in numerous ways. Your life and dedication to serve God and share his love and wisdom with the world is apparent and necessary. And you clearly have an anointing to teach in a way that is gentle and kind, yet real and genuine, just like Jesus. I want to encourage you to keep walking in the distinct path that God has called you to, trusting that He sees you and He knows the plans He has for your future, even if we don't have perfect clarity. He has big and beautiful plan that has already began to unfold in your life through your words. And I'm so excited to see the ways that your adventure continues to unfold. Thank you for being such a beautiful light in this world. Keep shining, my friend. You are created worthy.
Hey, friend. Thanks for listening to my story on the Created Worthy podcast. I hope that you leave encouraged to be your true self and to come honestly into all of your circumstances, including coming honestly to God and to find how He holds you in His story. Know that you are valued and treasured just for who you are, not for what you do, and that He delights in you. God's got you, and you got this.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. I hope that today's show resonated with you. And if it did, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show and it expands the reach of the stories and concepts that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. And if you're on social media, come hang out with me. You can find the Created Worthy podcast on both Instagram and Facebook. Or come follow along with my personal IG page, where I just share more about the real, sometimes messy life of your fellow worthy warrior. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, we are all created worthy.